All right. I love how everybody looks straight at me when it's go time. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our We Are Worship Wednesday webinar. We are excited about today because today is a little different. As you might see, there's one camera, one little page, and we're all here together. So we're just hanging out at our table, drinking some water and not coffee. But I just wanted to share a few things with you guys, as we normally do at the beginning of these webinars, about our free song of the week. So if you're not familiar with We Are Worship, it's a resource website. We have thousands of chord charts and lead sheets and all that stuff that you'll need to assist you in leading worship on Sunday. So we have a couple of free songs, and if you go to weareworship.com, you can download our free song of the week, which is The Goodness of the Lord by Travis Ryan, which is really, really good. You should go get it. And then our hymn of the month, which is God Most High All About Worship featuring Michael Farron. And that one is great as well. The All About Worship project just came out, and that is from the project. And then Travis Ryan, that will be coming out very soon, actually. So you basically get a free song from the upcoming album before it comes out, which is neat. So go to weareworship.com, check those out.
Cool. And today we have our guest, Benji Cowart, here in the studio with us because he's so devoted to this. Like, he drove hours and hours to be here.
I did. Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about how to deal with your spouse. I mean, difficult people. Difficult people on your ministry team, whether it's a worship team or a different ministry within your church. I think a lot of it can be applicable to different types of ministries within the church. So we're really excited to have you with us here today. And we are both wearing Star Wars shirts because today's May 4th.
May the 4th be with you.
Morgan didn't listen.
Didn't get the memo.
So if you're a Star Wars fan, happy May 4th. And we'll talk about some Star Wars, I guess, later on.
Not today. Not on this show.
The only reason I actually knew about it is because I saw your photo on Facebook with your son wearing Star Wars shirts. I was like, oh, I should wear one too.
You were representing.
So Benji, maybe start us off with like your story,
Yeah. So we just are the long and short story is that my wife and I are both born and raised here. Well, she was born somewhere else, but most of her life was spent here in Nashville, and I was too. And so we both graduated from Belmont, got married, and probably about a year after we were married, we went to seminary. And then from there, we spent the last basically 15 years in full-time ministry up until 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we moved back to Nashville, and I'm mostly writing, and she and I still lead worship together. But for the 15 years prior to that, we've been on staff at churches kind of all over the country.
Wow, man. So during this time, what's kind of your favorite thing in this season of your life?
Honestly, for me right now, the favorite is that my day looks different every day. I think that was one of the things when I for the way I'm wired, I kind of came to a point where being in the same place from 9 to 5 every day, I started realizing that I was noticing before anybody else did, but I was going to become a detriment to our church. But fortunately, I was like, maybe I should take myself out of this equation before somebody else does. And so that was part of it, because I just love every day being able to, I'm in a different place every day with different people, and that seems to be a sweet spot for me.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking about dealing with difficult people. So I'm assuming you've dealt with some difficult people.
That's 15 years of ministry.
And honestly, I would love in this whole conversation, I hope one of the outcomes would be that that this can be something that worship leader and sound man can sit down and watch together. So I think there should be, if I'm counseling you as a couple, which I joke, but literally one thing that I would hate for it to happen with this whole conversation is for anybody to use this as a weapon and go, I told you so, you should listen to this. That's not, I'm going to say this for the record. If you use this broadcast this way, then you're already in the wrong. So right now your sound man can look at you and go, I told you so, you're in the wrong. So, but I would love for this to be something where this actually is somebody that they can go, okay. Because what's funny though, is that I don't know if I can really pinpoint anybody that I would actually say is difficult. any more than like one, I'd like to confess that a lot of times I'm the difficult person. But yeah, like most of the time, just like it is in most relationships, it's jacked up communication, it's jacked up expectations, it's assumptions. So like we can just address all that, because I feel like a lot of that is where people who get perceived as difficult, more than likely there's their side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're not still reacting rightly from that place, they have a side of why they're coming from where they're coming from.
Yeah. Actually, yesterday on our Facebook page, somebody commented when we were promoting this webinar and said, "What if I'm the difficult person?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, join us.
Applaud that person for realizing.
Yeah.
I always laugh because people are like, we all have that friend who's like, all of my relationships, like people are just always mean to me. And part of me wants to go, who's the common denominator in all these relationships? It'd be you. So one, if you realize that, that's awesome.
Yeah. At the church that I was working at in Kansas City, I guess the worship leader before me was butting heads with the sound team, like leader, and they were just not in good terms. And the sound team leader ended up stepping down because it just got too, heated. But then when I stepped in, we were great friends and we got along really well. And I think part of it might be personality. Part of it might be communication, So what have you found as far as like the factors in those situations?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, like with the sound man, I think one of the great jokes that God has played on all of us is the personality wiring that it really does require to be a great sound man. And then the personality wiring that it takes to be a good worship leader, by putting those in a position where they have to work together, to me is like absolutely hilarious. Because like, I'm going to reference Kyle a whole lot. Kyle was my sound man in Buffalo. Okay. And we were there on staff for 7 years. And when I left, like, Kyle's one of my dear friends. But Joe, I used to joke with Kyle that like sound men, and Kyle included, they all have, there's a very distinct sound man personality. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times there's a very distinct worship leader personality. So to me, a lot of the times, like the worship leader definitely lives, they are not very pragmatic. They're kind of, we live in the land of unicorns and, and bubbles and rainbows. And, sometimes we are, and by definition of what we are creatively, we are idealists. So, we just kind of are like, yeah, we can do that. Why not? And a lot of times we're terrible about saying no, and we say yes to everything. Including, we can't even say no to ourselves. We have impulse control issues. And then you get the sound man who's kind of typically like, just the facts, please. Don't hug me. Stay away from me. I'm in the sound booth by myself for a reason. And that was very much Kyle. Like Kyle was he was very much that, hey, don't hug me. Not grumpy, but just very to the point. Which for some people, they get their feelings hurt when someone's to the point. Mm-hmm. So there potentially could have been some of that, but that's what we can talk through today. Some things that I learned and he learned along the way. And I feel like this really translates to a lot of different people in your worship team. Yeah. And so,
I had a question. I was thinking about this yesterday, and I don't want to divert too far off of the whole sound man kind of topic that we're on, but I've been in a situation where it was within the worship team, and let's just say the drummer, for instance, was like, we need to do it like this tempo or this, like this groove or this, and I'm like, okay, me as the worship leader, not like me alone, because everybody is leading worship together, but just kind of the one that's, helping organize everything. I'm like, I have a different opinion than you on how this should work and I'm somewhat can be a pushover, and I'm like, okay, well, if that's how you think it should be, and he's on drums, so he's the one carrying the song basically, and I can't really do anything about it. So what would you say to the worship leader? It's like, okay, if you have this disagreement with somebody in your worship team on how a song should be played on Sunday, what would you say? How would you handle that?
One of the things that everybody's got to be on the same page as to who it's for. Yeah. And really, honestly, and this isn't a knock, because I've definitely been in bands where everybody's got their opinion, But one of the things I have said is that more than anything, my first priority is to make sure that the people out there can sing what we're doing. They can sing what we want them to sing.
Mm-hmm.
So if it means including myself, whatever has to be taken out of the picture to make sure that happens, like to the detriment of, that means that I may not want if I have a 5-person praise team, not everybody needs to sing harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it sounds weird. So like everybody for them has to be willing to give something. So in that regard, with the drummer, like the hard part is it's a hard. You almost have to build this foundation beforehand.
Yeah.
Of saying, hey, who are we here for? What are we doing? We're here to make sure that those people understand that their ministry is to, in the music part of worship, is to do their ministry and sing to God. So all we're trying to do is create a distraction-free. It sounds so. I guess blunt, but I kind of feel like really at best what we do as a worship team is we create a karaoke track for people to comfortably, not comfortably, but they should just be easy for them to go in and worship God, and we kind of fall out of the way.
Natural.
Yeah.
So if they feel like because the drummer wants to push something, that they feel like they're having to auction something when they're singing. So, but you almost like in that situation where the argument's already there, like it's that foundation, because then if the foundation's already built, you can go, okay, let's step back. What are we all here to do? And I know that when I'm singing this, I know it feels better on drums, but when I'm singing this, it's really hard to get all this in. And then for you, like I would say this, because I feel like especially women, you get run all over. And so I kind of feel like
Morgan never gets run over.
Not on this building.
But I say all the time, like you have to walk in this weird mix of humility and confidence. The humility is that you most of the time singers, including myself, we're not the best musicians on the platform. We're lazy musicians. So I'm humble enough to go, if someone speaks in and they've got really good input for what the song should do, I'm smart enough to listen to them. But when push comes to shove, I also have the confidence, not in my ability, but in my calling.
Yeah. So
if God said, you're the person that's leading, then at some point you just got to say, look, I'm sorry you don't agree, but I'm called to lead, and so I'm going to lead. This is what we're doing, which I'm sure will feel totally foreign.
Yeah.
But it's the truth.
Happen. Yeah.
A lot of times in those situations, I feel like a good way to get everybody's buy-in and agreement is to go by the recording, this is the BPM or the arrangement of the recording. So this is how we're going to do it. I think a lot of times that works the best when there's disagreement, So.
Yeah, but that's tough, especially because you will get musicians especially when they're strongly opinionated. Yeah. And you're just like, I know that's how that feels for you, but I've got to sing this, and it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. It all makes sense now that you say, okay, what are we doing this for? Right. Because when I encountered a situation like that, I'm thinking, okay, well, this isn't right. This isn't comfortable. And I guess I just wasn't thinking about, okay, we're leading worship for these people to be able to sing this song. Right. And it just, I don't know, now it just clicks. Like, it never really occurred to me, like, okay, this is what, So I'm glad that you said that, because that helps a lot, I think.
Yeah, well, I think for everybody having the same why, like in anything you're doing, is massive. Yeah. Okay, that's the target. Yeah. It becomes a lot easier to see what everybody's supposed to do to get there.
Yeah. Have you ever had situations where there was like a team member or a sound person where their personality was very strong, and you guys were always just kind of, like fighting for authority almost on the worship team? Or
trying to think. Well, I will say this: when you're under authority, whatever you are to that person, you will have that under you someday. So I remember at one point I was at a place where I was a little bit contentious because I felt like I should have been the one leading, and that's just much younger and so I have been in situations where I had that person. So part of me wasn't as mad because I was like, this is just justice. This is just God putting that person to be what I was, which was not a great follower. I haven't had that a lot. And really with our, I can get into some of the issues with with Kyle and I, when I first came on staff in Buffalo, there had been a bit of an environment where everybody told on everybody. So it was like, okay, if I was frustrated with you, I wouldn't have that conversation with you. I'd go to your supervisor. It wasn't horrible, but it was just, there was no trust. So, I mean, one of the things when you are dealing with difficult people is, I think it's safe for everybody to come in and like, and this is something my wife and I are even learning just through counseling and all that, of like, okay, if I have a problem with you, I need to assume that the log is in my eye and assume the speck is in your eye. Because typically it really is like, it's an issue of perception. Yeah. So most of the time, most people, they overreact to something you do because they have about several years of other people doing something that they didn't like. And so it's like, so it's easy for a sound man. If I go, hey, can we get like, hey, I know this is last minute. Can I get a box drum though for this song? I don't think I want to use full kit. So he's thinking, oh, here we go again. Now all of a sudden we have last minute, never prepared worship leader. And this is what we're hit. So this is how it is. He's not going to listen to me. I've asked him several times, can I get this a week in advance? So he goes back into the baggage of years of being handled that way. And then when I get that response from him, I go back into the baggage of, oh, here we go again, grumpy sound man. So we both just added like massive drama to a non-dramatic situation. So one, just assuming that everybody is a difficult person, because we're already adding, like, I'm already assuming that I know why you're doing what you're doing, which is remotely not even true. And sometimes it's easy for you to assume that I'm doing what I'm doing and think you know why. So it's hard to do, but you got to learn, starting with people, is just zeroing out what you think, why you think they're doing it, and actually ask them. But what I began to learn about Kyle was that, like, so if I ask for a box drum, I'm thinking one mic, not a big deal. But because Kyle's actually really good at his job, Kyle's doing a studio setup on the stage. So for him, he's rolling his eyes when I ask for it, not being nasty, but I can tell he's not happy about it. But then I see what he's setting up and I'm like, whoa, I'm like, okay, this is amazing, but I want to make sure you knew I would have never asked for that last minute. And then he's like, it's fine, I'll do it. So even with Kyle, I even had to learn which no he was talking about. Because sometimes his no was seriously like, I really can't do that. But sometimes his no was like, I really don't want to do it, but if you push hard enough, I'll do it. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times, even when you have people on your teams, but even that didn't come until after we'd been there for a while. That's why I'm always amazed when you have worship leaders turning over, like leaving places. It's like, you didn't even get a chance to know anybody. Yeah. Like, I didn't feel like I even had a clue of who everybody was and that I had any trust. So I'd been there like 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And so much of that is built on trust. Of all of a sudden, Kyle began to realize, and I began to assume, okay, so Kyle actually wants the best for this situation. Kyle's not being lazy. And I feel like so many times we assume the worst about each other. Yeah. It's like the sound man's going, he just doesn't want to think about things, or he doesn't want. It's really like,
assuming gets you nowhere.
It's just
I assume stuff all the time, and it's always, you always assume the worst, I guess. Right. And so, I mean, assuming's not going to get you anywhere. You got to just go straight to the point and deal with what you got to deal with.
Right. Right, and actually lend some credit before it's even earned sometimes, to go, hey, they may actually have good motives here. Yeah. And I may not have good motives here. So.
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with communication, like actually communicating things, and also assuming the best about people.
Yeah, and where you communicate. Like the place to have the conversation with Kyle of disagreement is not me on the mic and him in the back of the room talking on the sound man's mic. That does not go well. In fact, we at one point, like we were all like, I grew up with brothers, so we settled things in the room. Now we couldn't settle things with Kyle like we settled things in the room, but Kyle understood. So, later that night I got off the mic and went back and just said, man, what's going on? Because that got heated quick. I was kind of, wow, that escalated fast. But it was one of those moments where you're just like, okay, something else is going on. And we talked through it and everything was fine, but it is sometimes just that, hey, you were really like that felt a little bit over the top. What's really going on? Like, is there something else that's going on that we haven't dealt with? Have I done something? Or So yeah, it's just over communicating. I think, I mean, in ministry, absolutely, to the point of like feeling like you're all 3-year-olds. How are your feelings? But it
Yeah.
kind of has to be that way.
Yeah.
When do you think it's time to bring in like a head pastor or somebody like that, or somebody that can kind of help the situation if you and this other person are just not coming to an agreement?
I think when you, I mean, and honestly, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think, but the way to do that is like, and that's what Kyle and I agreed to, is I said, I will never go over your head, or if I do, you'll be the first to know about it. And I'll tell you, hey, we're going to take this to so-and-so because this isn't getting anywhere. So I think anytime when you come to a place where it really is a situation that neither feels like they can give, and it's becoming poisonous, and then, but then the conversation still needs to be, like, you and I aren't getting this resolved. We need to take this to the next level to get help. We were in a unique situation. The sound man did not work under the worship ministry, the tech ministry, and the worship ministry. So he legitimately could say, no, I'm not going to do that. And I wasn't his boss.
Yeah.
So that was somewhere it's like, okay. But we seem to, most of the time, which I feel like in most conversations, is as soon as you establish trust and you're both willing to give, most of the time you can find a middle ground.
Yeah, totally. Hey, I forgot to mention that if you are watching us live, you can actually send us questions in the live chat room, and Benji will answer every single one of those. And if we don't know the answer, we'll just pretend that we do.
Yeah. We'll come up with something.
That's ministry anyway.
I found, that my relationship with the head pastor is like one of the most important relationships, I could have as a worship leader. And a lot of times when I had difficult people or dealing with, those kind of sensitive situations with like a sound man or whoever, I can go to the pastor, but not in like, I'm going to tell on this person, but like I need counsel. I need advice on how to deal with this. I think that's healthy.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally appropriate. I mean, there's definitely, it's just like, it's an organization, there's organizational structures, and you ultimately you're working. I mean, yes, you're working for the Lord, but you are working for the pastor. And so you're an under shepherd handling something on his behalf. So he does need to be in the loop it's not like you're going to his direct supervisor. You're actually going to say, hey, how I represent this represents you a little bit too. So what do I need to do?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's completely appropriate, and you're just going to need some advice anyway.
Yeah. And typically the senior pastor has like more experience with that person, knows that person better and has a bigger picture of, the church.
And they probably deal with more difficult people than the other person does. So they're used to it,
Well, that's a great point though for worship leaders, is because a lot of the times we think we have the whole picture. And you go to the pastor, and all of a sudden the pastor gives you some backstory, and you go, I'm going to give that person a lot of mercy and grace.
Yeah.
Because they've been smoked a few times, and they're just angry and hurting, and they just need. Some people just need. My pastor, used to say this all the time. The best thing that people can see is a history of good decision making over an amount of time. When then they begin to go, okay, this person actually is wise, and they mean well. They don't always get it right, but they're trying to do the right thing. And sometimes you need to let those people, give them room to see you making good decisions.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you something kind of personal. You lead with your wife. She sings with you. She has a great voice. Have you ever had conflicts with your wife, like during a rehearsal or after a service? Yeah. How have you guys dealt with that?
Well, she and I are pretty wide open, so I think probably we have to be careful to not make everybody uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because we'll just get at it. We'll just be like, no, that is not. And so it's healthy for us, probably not healthy for everybody else in the room. It just kind of gets tense and awkward. And I actually had at one point, I had my pastor call me on it. He said, man, your tone of voice was not okay. And I was like, but she's me. So yeah, we do. And it definitely is that balance of like, I'm always trying to be smart enough to know that 99% of the time she's right musically. Like she has good sensibilities about her, but she also sometimes just needs to she needs to drop the idea. I don't mean like not bring it up. I mean, she needs to say it and then give me time to react. Because like, if I'm like, so we talk about this all the time. If I'm in the middle of leading a song and she's like, I think we should do this. I'm like, which is over the top, but it's almost like, give me a second and say that, and then just let me just think that through for the next 5 minutes, which is just, I mean, that's just husbands and wives. Like, so yeah, we definitely have conflict. We've never had anything where it's just like we couldn't come to a middle ground. Because I even try to, we do a lot of times when we lead worship, because we lead together. She's just as much as the planning as I am. And so we'll bat things around, but for us, it's just an extension of our marriage. And sometimes we do that well, and sometimes we don't do it well at all.
Yeah.
So,
have you had like really strongly opinionated vocalists who want to take the lead on everything, or do harmonies that you don't like? And
they just want to go all over the place.
Yeah, you'll get. Like, here's what I don't do well with, and this is a fault. I don't do well with insecure people. And so when you get someone who's like, I didn't get, it's like I'm not mocking them, but it just, in my mind, it's like, I didn't get to sing this. And I'm just like, stop. Like, the best thing in the world is to get discovered, not announce yourself.
That needs to be like tweeted.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't, somebody else has said it, but it's like, I need to, if you are, this sounds horrible, but it's really true. If you're really good at something, somebody's going to find out about it.
Yeah.
And so, but by having that common target, when I would get singers who always wanted to sing harmony or always wanted to be heard, I could always refer to the common target and go, the goal is not for you to be heard. The goal is not for me to be heard. The goal is we create something. So, for instance, worship leader ad libs. I know we all think it's amazing. Where, like, here's the melody, and when we get to a big exciting part, I'm going to jump up a third or a fourth. Your guy who's a plumber in the church, he's not going, that's amazing. He's going, I can't sing anymore. What just happened? So one of the things we would do with our praise team singers is like, okay, if I'm going to get Skippy Happy Pants and I'm going to go do my thing, I'd make sure that at least 2 or 3 singers stayed on melody. It's like somebody has to stay home, so that the congregation always knows who they're singing with. If you are going to jump, that's fine, but do not leave them hanging, because they're not going to jump with you, and then you're just singing a solo. I think people who say, like, leadership, if no one's following, you're on a long walk by yourself. And it's kind of like that. If you're leading worship and you're soloing, you're just on a long walk by yourself. And nobody's with you. So like that kind of stuff where you're constantly going, what's the goal? The goal is that they sing. Which means sometimes, like, I gave my sound man permission, and he was always very gracious, but I said, Kyle, I know I tend to overplay on the acoustic. I need you to tell me. I need you to listen, and if we need space in this arrangement, which, I mean, like, the best band and the best teacher on this is Paul Balash, about when a band, everybody plays simply, like, the professionalism goes up, like, to a 10. So being aware of that, if you ever get a chance to go to his conference, this is for all of you, you need to see him walk people through overplaying versus simplifying and what that does. But most worship leaders, again, we're excited. And so that translates to when we should really be playing, like, we're playing like 30 seconds, like over the top. It's like hyper chipmunk. And we, like, so that's where I'm like, Kyle, if I'm overplaying and I'm muddy in the water, I need you to tell me. Not over the microphone system, not over the sound system, but privately just say, hey, man, you need to dial it back some. And I think a lot of the times if you go ahead of your team and say, I'm giving you permission, there's a way to do it. On the mic going, I don't think you should do that. That's not the way to do it. But in the context of rehearsal, saying, hey, I think it might help. We have a guy right now that I lead with who's one of our lead guitar players, and he's a brilliant musician, and he'll speak into things and go, I think if you played this, it'd be different. And I receive it every time because he's respectful in how he does it, but I trust his opinion. And he just knows he's a far better guitar player than I am, which that's, whatever your musicianship is, like, you're stupid if you don't listen to the people around you who are better at what you're trying to do than you are.
I've kind of had an awkward situation where I was leading worship.
You?
Yes. I have a lot of awkward situations.
I live there, I understand.
And, oh man, we'd be leading worship, and it'd kind of be one of those, like, closing moments, and he would try to direct us and tell us what to play, like, come on, play more, play harder, play, I'm like, we're filling out the moment.
Right.
And, in my mind, you have this ending moment and people are just like responding to the Holy Spirit, and he's like, "Come on, drums more," and he'll just be on the mic saying that. And
is this somebody who is this? I mean, like, you don't have to. Is it?
I'm not naming names.
No. How are they? Is it in your ears that you're hearing them?
Oh no.
They're on the mic.
Yeah.
So this is probably the pastor.
It was.
Well, I'm hearing
and so I, in this, I was just a little uncomfortable. Like, okay, do you take the pastor's lead on that, or do you?
Well, that's a conversation. That's a situation that if one in that moment, yes.
Yeah.
But so here's the default. So we've talked about worship leader personality, soundman personality. Here's pastor personality. Pastor wants it to feel like all pastors want people throwing babies up on the stage and it's a field goal, and it literally be like, they want this. They want stadium rock all the time.
Yeah.
Not all of it. Everything, there's an exception. But like I've found that pastors, they never want that intimate moment because they got to come up and preach.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like if they feel like, even though we don't feel it, but if they, a lot of times pastors I feel like I'm walking into a funeral up on the stage.
Yeah.
And they've prepared their message to have a joke or to have something light. And so all of a sudden it feels inappropriate. So I think if you can create a context where maybe 2 or 3 times you give him that, like even sometimes it's really good to flip the worship order altogether.
Yeah.
So, because I know there's some Sunday mornings where now that I'm a lot of times where I'm being led, sometimes like I really resent getting the worship leader beat down person thing in the morning where it's like, everybody up, and you're going, it's morning. I need you to ease me in.
That's true, yeah.
And so it's sometimes just even flipping the whole, like, most of the time your worship dynamic starts here and kind of eases you down.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's good to start here and take you up so that when the pastor comes up, like everybody's like about to go nuts. But I think if you give enough situations where he gets that, then he's way more willing when it is that moment to go, okay, we need to change things up. This will be. So it's give and take, but it's knowing his personality. Like pastors, I've met very few pastors who do not want like it to be rocking right before they come up on stage.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are former athletes and by the way, in sports, all pastors are ball hogs. You can put me on the record for that.
So in the live chat, David asked this question, which is kind of related to this. I don't know if you want to add anything. How would you handle it if the person in authority to you, how do you approach that person, or do you just take it to God in prayer? Maybe this is a drummer asking about how to approach the worship leader.
When you have those situations, so if you're worship leader and you're the drummer, one of the things that we do not do well in the church that we really need to learn to get better about is confrontation. Now, I think the way that you go about, like, so instance, when I've worked for pastors and I've had to push back on something, one, there needs to be a trust established with the pastor this past Jerry in Buffalo, like I also watched him do this under authority. So the starting point is, I will do what you say, but could we try this? And here's why. So already establishing not dissent, but you're just coming in saying, hey, look, I trust the calling that God has on you, and I'm going to follow that. But I want to push back on something. Can we try this? And if it's a worship leader of saying, can we try this because this is kind of what I think is going on when we're doing this, as you build trust, then everybody will know that everybody is for the greater good. So if you're saying, like, I think when we do this, I feel like people check out. Well, I don't know what the specific situation is, but I think with authority, again, I think I heard, maybe it was Dustin Smith say this at the All About Worship conference, but you got to be okay with being under that authority. And if you just keep bumping and bumping and bumping to where you can't, undermining that authority is never a biblical option. That is not an option. It's never okay. You're never going to be in the right. So, but you do have the choice to get out from under that authority, and you can go be somewhere else. But most of the time, I think if we would communicate, but that also means that doesn't mean that you can't push back. And you can't say, and again, not a deal breaker, and we're going to do where you want to go, but could we try this? I don't think this is working. Or like even, it sounds, for guys, it's hard to get into this kind of language, but hey man, when you talk to me like that, I really kind of feel like I'm really demeaned, and I really feel like I'm disrespected. can we figure out a different way to go about this?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't, like, if you don't communicate that to them, you don't give the Holy Spirit a chance to work in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to learn to tell each other the truth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we're really bad at that. We'd rather just be passive aggressive and bite their ankle when they walk by. Not literally. Although
you must have done that once.
if you actually do that, I want to hear about it. But just that whole passive aggressive, and then you're bitter. And I mean, like, one of the things that is so nasty for worship teams is when contempt sets in your heart. Basically, contempt, if you're wondering if you have contempt, here's an indicator that you have contempt, is you're having confrontational conversations with that person in your mind, but not when they're in the room.
Mm.
That usually means you've got unresolved issues that, like, and that's just a poison. So you can't live in that place. I've done it. It's bad for you, bad for everybody around you.
So a lot of it has to do with how you say something to the other person. It can make a huge difference. Yeah, totally. So I want to ask you about a recent song that you wrote on, All About Worship.
Yeah.
Released a project last Friday called My Pursuit, and you wrote on the title track. So can you share with us in the next couple minutes just the story behind that song?
Yeah, it was me and Dustin Smith and Scott Engineering. Is that how you pronounce? I always pronounce it wrong.
She knows.
Engineering.
Yeah.
Pastor Scott. So it's a lot easier if I. But we were. So we were all in Colorado for the writers retreat, and I kind of feel like that song in some ways that people joke around about. Like, I don't think any of us write songs that you can just say it's a 3-hour song. It's more of like a 40-year song of I'm kind of pulling together things that I just know to be true. So there were different moments of that. Like, for me, part of my story is, I've seen you, I could never see enough is the verse. I felt you, I'm ruined for your touch. Like, there's just things that I've seen of God in my own life where I'm really confident of this, that, like, you really could show me a really good argument on paper for atheism, and I would just go, I've seen too much. Like, bless your heart, give the old good try. And so some of that for me is just that's just began to set in, and also, like, I've been around enough of God to where when those moments kind of ruin me for a lot of the other junk, and I'm not in a good place. I still chase other stupid things, but it's like once you've kind of tasted that, you just sort of, it's like, nothing else is going to do it. Dustin, I clearly remember Dustin singing that bridge, never gonna stop chasing you, and like, it's Dustin. That's what he does. But like, just kind of going, yeah, man. And so the whole conversation, and even Scott, just kind of, we were just through a conversation of going, what is holy, holy, the more I see, the more I want. And I think in part of that, we were even having a conversation of really, like, our brokenness has really given a bad rap of what holiness is. Because, it's like, I feel like what God's hatred of things is just the opposite of what he is. And the problem is that scares us to death, because the opposite of what he is resides in us sometimes. And so we're like, oh, I don't want to be around that. But like, holiness isn't like everything that's good and everything that's right and everything that's love. And so it's like, the more and more you get true glimpses of that, the more and more you go, I want that. I want to become that. I want that at what, everything that's of that essence. And so really, like, I think what I love most about that song, and it sounds so, but I can remember all the words to it. And that's like, obviously
that's huge.
If you're watching this, you know that I'm a talker already. So I'm, most of the time I overwrite. And so just to have something that's just so like, I mean, like, this is a random chase down worship history, but you think about, like, this whole, for so long we had hymns, and then we had the Jesus movement. And this was right in between that really weird time before we had transparency sheets up on the wall, but we weren't using hymn books. Yeah. And so you think about the songs that were written during that time of, like, I love you, Lord. Yeah. I mean, I grew up singing those, Father, I adore you in the round. We need more round songs.
That's before Morgan's time.
That's before your time, I know. You kids. But all these amazing songs that are still with us were written to where they had to be like, all I've got is my acoustic. I don't have time to write down the words for you. this thing's got to be. And that was in an early raw movement, and then we got the transparencies, and then we got the I still call whatever the word display is PowerPoint, which
Yeah.
my tech guys are always like, what? But so and I think there's something even about like Good Father that has that, like just reminded me of just that old school rootsy. And so it's kind of, for me, it's like it's a monumental task to write a song that I can remember the words.
Yeah.
And to write something that hasn't already been said, but it's still very simple to where people can catch on and just kind of be in the moment of the song.
Yeah. And sometimes, the trick is too, is we're, especially if you are writing from Psalms or those kind of things, it's like those words are not broken. Our baggage with them sometimes is broken, and we, or like sometimes I do feel like because worship leading became a thing, then everybody started wanting to write worship songs. And so sometimes I felt like you'd hear songs that literally sounded like a worship leader Mad Lib. Like it'd be like, okay, I need a worshipful phrase. Righteous.
Yeah.
But then you'd hear the song and go, I don't think that person even knows what those words mean, because they're like, my eyes are crossed out. I really don't know what we're singing right now.
Yeah.
So there's the danger of that. But then sometimes, like, I mean, I tell you who I think is Amanda Cook, to me, blows my mind, because she'll say something really familiar, and then she'll put something so intimately relational. And it just wrecks me because it's all so new. Like I'm going, whatever that hotline is you have with God, I covet it.
Can I get your number?
Yeah. I was like, can I figure that out? But it's like, but it just all feels new. And a lot of times she's using stuff straight from the Psalms, but then you feel like it's coming out of her language with God too. So I don't know. It's always just that. It's always that struggle. And sometimes that comes to a melody. A melody all of a sudden sets a word that we've known forever into a new place where you go, whoa, never thought of it like that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So for those of us who want to stalk you on social media, what are some best ways to stalk you?
I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. It's just Benji Cowart.
Cool.
And I apologize in advance for most of it. Because it's either like most of it's useless, some of it's useful. But so follow at your own risk. But yeah, and then and my wife and I, Benji and Jenna Cowart, on Instagram too. Twitter.
Cool. I think I posted a video of an interview I did with you a while back, and somebody was like, "Is that the Rude guy?" Is it the guy?
Yeah.
Because you covered the song "Rude" and then went viral.
That Rude. I can't believe they would
the
say
song
that
Rude.
about Benji.
The Rude. Well, some have said I apparently don't make a great first impression, but yeah. So yeah, that was a fun rabbit chase and all that.
That's so funny.
Awesome. YouTube celebrity for about 2 seconds.
Yeah, must be nice, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not anyone's favorite YouTube celebrity.
No.
We all know that. So I'll just take a little bit of your fame. That's awesome. Well, if you guys want to check out My Pursuit, it's on We Are Worship. So just go to We Are Worship, search it. You can download the chord chart.
Watch the video.
Yeah, watch the video. So just a great way to learn the song and go get the album. And thanks, Benji, for coming and hanging out with us.
Thanks for letting me come and talk a lot.
We will be here at the same time, same place next Wednesday with Dustin Smith. And that is going to be good. Dustin's always bringing, some sort of.
Doesn't matter what the topic is. As soon as he opens his mouth,
you feel convicted, and then you're like, okay, Lord, here I am, anew, kind of thing. So
that's another hotline to God.
Yeah. I guess that's it. So I thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next Wednesday.